So September 7th in 2020, and this thing about the coronavirus, right? 85% experienced little or no symptoms. So, and then they have a list of now it was a couple of symptoms, right? Now there's about 15 symptoms, and virtually, if you experience anything out of the ordinary other than bliss during your day, you could have the virus. But if 80 to 85% experience little or no symptoms, what difference does that make? See, if you test positive for the virus and you got no symptoms, what does it matter? And then they say there is the death rate, right? It's around 4%. But how do they know it's from the coronavirus? Yeah, just because you die and you had a sneeze and you test positive for the coronavirus, how do you know you died from the coronavirus? See what I mean? How do you know that? Because you have inside of you so many different viruses all day long that are active, and your body is fighting this constantly, and that's your immune system. You're breathing stuff in the air, all kinds of toxic bacteria and all kinds of stuff. They developed a test for the coronavirus. Why don't they develop a test for the heebie-jeebies virus and see how many people are getting the heebie-jeebies virus around the world? And they can ascribe a death rate because somebody will die and they'll test for heebie-jeebies. They got heebie-jeebies, so they'll chalk it up to heebie-jeebies, right? Well, that's what's going on. Why are they reporting on the number of cases? I think it's 24 million, something like that, worldwide. It seems like a big number, doesn't it? Well, look, 85% of those people experience little or no symptoms. So why are you reporting on 20 million people who aren't experiencing any symptoms? I mean, what's important about that? I mean, there's other viruses in your body that are extant and, experiencing little or no symptoms. So why don't you report on all those cases? Well, the interesting thing about it is in the United States, according to the CDC, for the last 10 or 15 years going back, there's a number of viruses that are extant in the United States on a yearly basis, right? There's the influenza flu. There's the swine flu. There's the Asian flu. And there's probably a bunch of other flus, okay? And every year, right? Every year, it comes back in a slightly different form, of course. You can't get rid of these viruses. They mutate so fast, you just can't get rid of them. That's all. Polio virus, yeah, you can, right? Other types of things, yeah, you can. But the coronavirus may be a mutation of some other virus that's been around, and it's just, it's part of the human race, and not a big deal. People are gonna experience death, but how do you know it's from the coronavirus? Just because they test positive for coronavirus, how come you don't test them for some other viruses, and maybe it was actually caused by some of those? Maybe it wasn't, People are ascribing death to coronavirus when somebody dies and they test positive for coronavirus, you see, and they chalk it up to the death rate. Well, according to the CDC, in 2017, the death rate for the yearly flu was 6.5%. See? The death rate for the coronavirus, as they say, it's from the coronavirus, is like 4%. Now, you see, and look at the paranoia that is being created by somebody around the world to scare the pants off people to wear masks constantly for this virus that is more benign, as one might say, than the ordinary flu that comes every year. And you don't even know if the death rate of 4% ascribed to the coronavirus, when people have little or no symptoms from it, right? Totally different from the yearly flu. When you have the flu, the yearly flu, you get symptoms. See? Yeah, you get symptoms. You're going to be in bed, right? coronavirus, you may not even experience it, right? So why is the paranoia about coronavirus when it amount to a hill of beans? See? Why are they talking about this when they don't even know what they're talking about? Determining something has died from the coronavirus when it's got little or no symptoms. Well, in the United States, the influenza flu is a yearly thing, the swine flu, yearly thing, and all the flus, yearly thing. Well, the influenza flu alone, okay, the cases of influenza flu alone in the United States, on the average, is a minimum of around 30 million cases a year, and usually up to 40 and 45 million cases of influenza flu alone in the United States. Okay? Now, the coronavirus, people who test positive, the entire world, only 24 million. See? And in the United States, the influenza flu, not counting the Asian and the bird flu, and some of the others that are happening every year, 35, 40 million is common cases of influenza flu, which has a higher death rate than the coronavirus. So, and the symptoms are debilitating for the influenza flu. I mean, really very serious stuff, and the people, die from it very easily, particularly the elder, right, at risk. And so you see, who is, there's some people who are going to profit from this, and the Federal Reserve is using it to print more U.S. dollars and dilute the U.S. currency to get to China, and also to reap some fleecing of the American public shortly. That's why the interest rate is almost zero again, and the stock market is enormously high. These are the characteristics that the Federal Reserve does just before the fleecing. The stock market crash of 29, interest rates were zero, stock market out of hand. The 2008 real estate bust, the interest rates were zero, and the real estate market out of hand. And then the Federal Reserve steps in and changes the interest rate all of a sudden and surprises everybody and crashes the market. And that's what's going to happen now in a different way when they cause hyperinflation, and they're going to get to China in that way, and the trillions and trillions of dollars that are there. I know I've outlined that before in some videos. And there's other things about this paranoia. For instance, that children don't communicate it. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire freaking life. You think that a virus, a flu virus, is going to choose between a child, a middle-aged, or an adult, and say, I won't go into the bloodstream of that person? Everybody knows when there's a flu going around, you don't send your children to school because they're so highly communicable among children. I mean, highly. And all of a sudden, look, you see, children don't have to wear masks in public. Because they don't, somebody says they don't communicate it. Oh, really? Maybe the coronavirus isn't being communicated at all anyway. And maybe nobody needs to wear masks. Huh? You ever think of that? See, nobody's really assessing what's coming out of the paranoia machine. Where it's coming from. Doctors are extremely paranoid because they've been fed this medical stuff, and they're not even thinking, right? They're not even thinking, It's gotten worse, 4 months ago, some people were not wearing masks, and in the grocery store and stuff. Now, you're required to wear a mask everywhere, out in public. I mean, city parks. I mean, England has got fines for people in public gatherings and illegal stuff. I mean, very severe fines, and I don't know. People are going nuts, and there's no detectable symptoms of the virus. And if you have it, big deal. If you communicate it, big deal. Big deal. Yeah, sorry, but it's just, you're so much worse off with a yearly influenza flu or swine flu or avian flu. And nobody's paranoid of that. The death rate is much higher. The symptoms are more severe, but the coronavirus, if you test positive, why does it matter? Why does it matter if you test positive and you got no symptoms? I mean, suppose you tested positive for the hibblebumblagaboo flu, but it's got no symptoms. See, oh, well, wear a mask so you don't communicate it. Well, that's the coronavirus mentality here. Is anybody listening to themselves? This is crazy. Here's a real question, you have to ask. If the coronavirus has little or no symptoms, why did anybody develop a test for it? Why did anybody think to develop a test for something that you can't tell if you got it, and it has no importance to you? Why did anybody develop a test for something like this? And how do you know that it spread? How do you know that somebody that you tested today hasn't had it for the last year? And you detect it today, and you add it to the case list as though you've got an increase of cases, when all it amounts to is you've got an increased testing for something that never existed before. And now you ascribe death to it because somebody died and they had the virus. And what are the symptoms of the virus? How do you know it was the virus? Look at the list of that. You go into a hospital or somebody will say, and they will read off a list now of 15 symptoms. And you are going to have one of those symptoms surely each day. And they're going to test you for the coronavirus then, and they're going to find the coronavirus most likely, because the coronavirus is probably through the entire population in the world already. And they are just getting around to testing enough so they can, more cases they discover, then they say more people have acquired the virus, as though it happened yesterday, when in fact it was just the testing, right? You see, if they tested the world population today, the entire one, and there were 50% had the virus, and they tested it all tomorrow, and now 75% had the virus, then you would know that 25% got the virus. But if you test only 5% of the world's population, and you see that 1% has the coronavirus, and then you test an additional 5% tomorrow, and you find another 1% more cases, and then you say, oh, we now have 2%. We now have another 1% of new cases. It's spreading. You see? I mean, who is overseeing this project? I mean, is there a committee out of the UN? It's the coronavirus committee overseeing the development of paranoia and detection of a virus that we can't tell it exists. I mean, you got to be kidding me, people. You people just aren't thinking this through. Somebody invented a test for a virus, that nobody knew they had, and had no symptoms. And the symptoms that people had that they ascribed to the virus should have been ascribed to the ordinary flu. A runny nose, a cough, a sneeze, a headache, sounds like an ordinary bug to me. Why did they develop a special test to identify a special virus that there are no symptoms for? When the obvious symptoms are for the ordinary flu. And how do you know that the ordinary flu wasn't there and they tested for the coronavirus, right, with a special test, and they found the coronavirus when the person actually had a regular flu and the coronavirus had no symptoms? According to the hospitals, 80 to 85% have no symptoms. So how did you delineate a positive test for both and ascribe it to the coronavirus when it has little or no symptoms, but the flu does. See, the obvious thing is to say it is the ordinary flu. A sneeze, a cough, a headache. Right? See, nobody is thinking this through. Where did this paranoia originate? Who is doing it? Right? Why did they create a test for something that you don't know you have? Because you can't tell. Who in their right mind? This is a scientist that's got too much time on his hands. What about other viruses that we have every day in our body, as well as coronavirus? And we can ascribe sneezes and coughs and that kind of thing to those. How many millions of cases are those? Maybe more prolific. You can't stop some kinds of communication of certain viruses and bugs and something in the human race. It just can't be done. And they act as though you're going to be able to do this with the coronavirus. And you don't realize it has the characteristics. You can't do it to that. You can't do it with the influenza flu, can you? How many decades? And nobody has even tried to get rid of the influenza flu. They get vaccines. Who is doing this? Who is marshaling this paranoia it's sweeping the world? And it's, if you think about the common sense of it, it's got absolutely no common sense behind it. What they need to do, test the whole world for influenza flu. Test the whole world for coronavirus. Why not? And the percentage increase they have next week then. But now, what do? In Italy, they discovered another million new cases. Well, they had another million testing. They didn't test those million the day before, did they? These aren't new cases. These are cases that have just been discovered because of new testing, right? And in the United States, they're going to have a V recovery or a W recovery. How about a Q recovery and an SPD recovery, and a quid pro quo recovery? Or how about a QED recovery, I mean, what are you talking about recovery? You can't recover from the number of cases of influenza, It's going to increase every year, There's going to be 30, 40 million cases in the United States alone of that flu virus strain, okay? Aside from swine, avian, bird, and all the other flus, okay? I mean, there's a ton of them, right? Nobody cares. Make a vaccine. Some people are going to die. Some people are going to recover. Nobody cares. And there are a lot of symptoms to the influenza flu, aren't there? I mean, a lot of debility. You can't go to work. You don't have the flu. You have testing positive for the virus in your body. See, and that's they're reporting as a case. You see, and then they'll say somebody went to the hospital. Ooh, somebody went to the hospital. Well, why did they do that? The coronavirus paranoia team, is chasing ambulances. That's all. You see, you start looking at this coronavirus paranoia team. That's fostering this stuff around the world. Earlier we had the cases were going away, and all of a sudden, it's coming back. It's coming. What do you mean it's coming back? Did you retest the population that you hadn't tested before and they were testing positive now? There was no record of that kind of stuff. No. They got more tests and now they're finding more cases. Well, duh. I mean, the insanity, And now they're requiring masks. You can't use a bandana anymore. You got to have a mask, as though that makes any difference, right? As though that makes any difference whatsoever, And you see these heads of state, these governors, somebody comes down, they say, with a corona flu, a guy from Brazil, right? President, or I don't know, there's top people, and he went into the hospital, right? And they say he was testing positive. Well, how do you know it was a coronavirus? How do you know it wasn't some other strain of flu that he had? I mean, everybody's getting that, How can you have all these, anytime heads of state, anybody high profile comes down with some kind of a bug, they test them for coronavirus. Well, the coronavirus is already throughout the world population, way ahead of the testing, or, They report 24, 27, I don't know, million of cases around the world, right? Well, that's all they've tested. The coronavirus is way ahead. It's disseminating itself. You can't stop it with a mask. That's insane. You can't stop influenza with a mask. The way it makes itself around the world is just, it's unbelievable. I mean, if any corporation could market its product like influenza, it would be a megalopolis, kind of corporation within a month. I mean, the way some of these flu viruses, you can't stop them. You can hardly even slow them down, at all. It's been that way for decades, and the human race gets along and all that kind of stuff. And this business about the coronavirus, it's just, for some reason, the paranoia is being couched in such a fashion that people fail to use their brains, They fail to use their brains, that the coronavirus is well spread throughout the world's population already. It's been that way for a very long time. Before the virus, they say it originated in China, right? How do they know that? See, how did it get from China, a few months ago to every country in the world now, 24 million, like you think you're going to stop it, huh? Right, with a mask? Or you think it actually propagated itself around the world like that? I don't think so. Not going to convince me that a virus, sure, they started testing people, right? They didn't have much testing, and they tested somebody, and then they found, quarantine the ship. One person had it, How did it get to 24 million people in 6 months? See what I'm saying? And little or no symptoms. What's the big deal? Death rate, much lower, if you can prove that the death was from coronavirus. How do you know it wasn't from some other bug that has the same symptoms? Because there's so many symptoms of the virus that are the same. A sneeze, a runny nose, a headache, a cough, itchy abdomen, a cramp in the back of your foot, your head hurts, your hair is getting short, you can't stand the light. I mean, they come up with symptoms that, you can't tell. I mean, they don't make any sense. If you look at medical diagnostics, a disease has some very specific that are characteristic of that disease. A cough is not characteristic of coronavirus. It is characteristic of influenza. It is characteristic of all other kinds of viruses and diseases. It serves no purpose to say, have you had a cough? We're going to test you for the coronavirus, okay? Because why don't they test you for what the real cause of your cough is, see? Why don't they test you for the real cause of your headache? How do you know that the reason you have a headache isn't contagious? And it's not the coronavirus, but you test positive for the coronavirus or you don't. And either way, they're not going to check for what the disease actually is that you've got. You see, they're crazy. See, they're nuts. The medical community is not using scientific approach to this situation, right? And it's who is marshaling this paranoia? Well, the Federal Reserve from Interbank is going to make huge amount of money, and the stepping stones, as I've covered before, go directly to the trillions and trillions of dollars that are in China's population and government. And Federal Reserve has done it many times in the United States, and Interbank has done it many times just like this around the world, okay, with their branch offices. Anyway, so been trying to cover some of these, just thinking off the top of my head. Look, I haven't thought a lot of this stuff before. Just making this recording, thinking up, hey, let's think about the situation here. What's going on? And look, I don't know. If you get sick and die and they test you positive for coronavirus, they're going to ascribe the coronavirus. But how do you know? How do you know it wasn't something else in your body that they didn't test for that actually did cause the death? See? You know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that are like that. Well, because they'll want to use that in their paranoia. But you got no way of proving that in that case, right? See, now, if you got the mumps and you die because of, this, that, and another thing, or if you got, there's some diseases, that are definitive. I don't know, like syphilis, okay? Syphilis progresses, and the symptoms are always the same, see? Very specific. They're not 15 different symptoms of syphilis, and they cause some mechanical problems within your physiology that cause certain symptoms to shut down and you die, okay? Now, coronavirus doesn't got those, okay? They don't have those. If you have influenza flu, there are some things that are characteristic of influenza flu that will cause you to die, This has not been demonstrated, and they're not a lot, you see. They've said coronavirus has like 10 or 15. It used to be 2 or 3 you have the flu, right? But the coronavirus, that is. And now they say they're like 15 or 20, right? And that's insane. That just isn't, that's not medical diagnostic. That's not medical training there, okay? That's just catching people to any time they feel, oh my God, and people are wearing masks in their houses now and, quarantining various family members and, coronavirus has swept the world long before this testing was done, okay? How do you know? It wasn't, see? It tested, sometimes it was China saying, well, how do you know coronavirus wasn't already around the world if you couldn't test it? See? You don't. And how are you going to justify it to anybody, you tested one thing in China, and in 6 months, you got 24 million cases sweeping the world? I don't think so. Dandelions might spread that fast. No, just kidding. But, and with little or no symptoms. See? Sorry. I'm not buying this, okay, obviously. And anybody who does, you got a problem, okay, because you are clearly not a scientific thinker, okay? You are basing your limbic system as a basis for your paranoia. And that's exactly what the paranoia coronavirus squad team is doing in the world. And that's what doing it, just does not make any sense at all. Anyway, in the end, this virus has no unique markers, which is kind of curious. Is why did anybody develop a test for something that has no unique markers and mimics many other flus and viruses that are already extant? Why? And why, if it's more benign than all those, is it now paranoid when the regular influenza is actually very debilitating? In other words, mumps has a marking factor, doesn't it? Measles, chickenpox, shingles, poison ivy, ptomaine poisoning, all these have unique markers, and when you see them, you know what the disease is. But if you had a disease that mimicked the mumps, why would you develop a test to separate the mumps virus from something else if they were the same characteristics, you see? And here we have the coronavirus, and you look at there used to be 2 or 3 or 4, now they're like 15, maybe more, including lesions on your feet, and I don't know, sore butt, I don't know what they are all now, but they mimic all these other flu viruses, right? So if they mimic this and there's no unique marker, why haven't we been told of a unique marker? You see, if there were one, and since it doesn't appear to be any, if you look at the list, other than any type of flu, why would anybody develop a test to isolate some unknown virus? See, which prior to the test, it's already spread around the world. And most likely, we've developed the test to go around the world, and we've discovered the coronavirus is already there, right? In other words, somebody who tests positive for the virus already had the virus, see? And you don't know when he got it. But what they're saying is, in the report, is that we've discovered a new case and a spread
an additional spread of the coronavirus. And that simply isn't true. There's no way to demonstrate that at all. So why are these people doing this? You see, this virus has no unique markers. It's spread well ahead of the testing, and when they discover new cases by the testing, they say it is spreading more, which is just, somebody is not using their head. They're using they're on the paranoid spreading team. What's going on anyway? So that's the skinny.